So tonight we're going to take up the topic of how to love yourself. It should be quite easy to love the self, since it is the thing that we are and what is closest to us. And yet, probably most of us in this room, if we were asked the question, do you love yourself? We would reply, well, kind of, maybe, yeah. It's not recommended in our society where to be derogatory towards the self is considered as a form of humility. And in fact, it's a wrong interpretation of humility to put the self down. When Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as the president of our country, he used a very beautiful quote. They weren't his words. The quote was from Marianne Williamson. And it was something about you don't make the world a better place by diminishing yourself. No? We say, who are we to be brilliant, to be enlightened? But actually, we do a disservice to the self by not recognizing our greatness and by not loving ourselves. Because if the world were filled with people who loved themselves and who were enlightened, what kind of a world would we have? If everybody in this world loved themselves and took great care of themselves accurately, what kind of a world would we have?
Utopia.
We would have heaven on earth. Instead, what do we have? Instead of heaven, what do we have?
Hell.
We have hell. Varying degrees of hell. It's as if we are living in a huge masterminded prison. Some people have more comfortable cells than others, but most of us feel trapped. We don't feel free. And the reason is because we don't love ourselves. We don't know how to take care of ourselves. And we don't know how to enjoy what we do have. And so this is why tonight we're going to take up this very important topic about self-love or self-care or self-appreciation. So the first step to loving the self is to first recognize and to remember, to understand what the self is. If we are to think about, especially as women, we're encouraged to take care of ourselves in a very specific way. We need to have our hair done. If we want to pamp ourselves, we go and have a pedicure or a manicure, probably best of all a massage. Yeah? And that's always to do with the body. But in fact it is the soul, the spirit that we need to take care of. And so the first step in self-love is this recognition and understanding that I need to take care of myself in all ways, physically, emotionally, socially, financially, and spiritually. But it starts with spiritual well-being and the spiritual recognition that although I have a body and I'm occupying this body, that I'm not this body. That I am the soul that is making this body work. I am the soul that is making everything alive. I am the soul, I am the living being. So to come to a state of self-love, there has to be a deep churning on this aspect. Firstly, of the great wonder it is. It's an absolute miracle. You are a miracle. You, the living being, are occupying a meat sack. It is. It's a sack of flesh and bone. If you, the soul, were to leave that body, the body would plop down, fall down on the ground, and be quite useless. And yet, a metaphysical entity is making matter move. This is a great miracle. And so the first step in actually loving yourself is the recognition of this truth, that I, the soul, am making this body move. And connected to that is the whole understanding of mastery, because everything that you command your body to do, you do. And so you're the master of this body. And being the master of your body means that you have greatness. And the fact that it's a miracle that we can actually do this. We take it for granted, like we take so many things for granted in life. The fact that the sun rises every day and that summer follows spring. We take all of these things for granted. And yet everything is a miracle. But the first miracle is the miracle of the self. And so when I come to feel this wonder of how great it is that I, the soul, am embodying this sack of flesh that I've received, and I'm making it move, and through it I'm experiencing so many wonderful things in life. I experience life. So the magic and the wonder of this truth and this reality needs to be contemplated, and not once a week, certainly not just once a day, but often. We are living miracles. So every single human being is a miracle. We know that. You see that. If you ask your parents, those of you whose parents are alive, ask your parents what it was like on the day that you were born. They really celebrated. This is why we celebrate our birthdays. We celebrate our birthdays because the day that you were born was a great day. The day you incarnated and you came out of that safe womb and you entered and you started your story as a human being. So this is the first thing to realize, that I am a miracle. And it's not on the basis of ego that we take this. It's on the basis of appreciation of the wonder of life, the appreciation of what nature has done for us, the appreciation of the fact that I am alive. Because we take too much for granted. And this is when life becomes mundane and ordinary, when we take things for granted. But every moment is a miracle. And to feel that I am a miracle. And so on a mental level, to take care of the self mentally is to also to have this recognition, and to then also to use many different meditation techniques on a practical level. So, for instance, those of you who saw on Facebook, watch yourself talk, because you are having a conversation with the universe. That's how I advertised this talk. Watch yourself talk, because you are having a conversation with the universe. So internally, on a mental level, when we start to take care of ourselves on a mental level, we have to start waking up to and listening to the messages that we are programming inside. And most of the time, like we discovered last week when we were talking about making the mind the best friend, a lot of our internal conversations or the internal narrative that is going on, it's automatic and it's based on habitual thinking. We are deeply habituated beings. So there is no exception that in fact we have many habituated thinking, thought patterns to do with how we feel about ourselves internally. And the first step in loving the self is to begin this process of listening to the narrative that is happening inside. Sometimes it comes out in speech as well. We'll do something that is a mistake. It's a small mistake. We may just drop our pen. And then we say, oh, I'm so stupid. We do this. Oh, what an idiot I am. Do you have this kind of narrative? You must do, because I do, and I'm quite an ordinary person too. We do. We go, how could I? Yeah. Sometimes we do something silly, we go, oh, so stupid. We do this. And this kind of self-negation is a deep habit that we have. It is a reflection of how it is that we feel about ourselves. Because the relationship internally, which is ego-driven, internally, that relationship is criticizing the self all the time. We criticize ourselves. Now, if you were to take a very young child and you wanted to raise that child and give that child the very best possible start in life, the very last thing you're going to do to that child is criticize it. You rather would be encouraging. So many of my students at the moment at college are facing the very clear reality that they are going to fail either my subject or another subject or something, and they're panicking about it. So I'm counseling a lot of people at the moment, and I'm saying there is nothing wrong in failing. Failing is sometimes very good. There's a cute little meme about it that FAIL actually stands for First Action in Learning. FAIL stands for First Action in Learning. So if they fail, so what? Then you do the course again. You've learned something. One student was saying, oh, maybe you should speak to my mother. And she said, no, then you mustn't speak to my mother, because then you'll tell her the truth. And I said, yes, because I know the truth, because you have been indulging yourself in developing your social life, which is fine. You've now learned how to function as a member of society and have a great social life. You learned something. Okay, so you're going to fail my subject because of it, but you've learned something, because that's also important, to learn how to function socially. So is failing such a big deal then? It's not such a big deal. But we berate ourselves, or this narrative that starts internally where there isn't a kind approach. Yes, there can be a mistake. To indulge the self is not the same as loving the self. So this is the big mistake people do make. They make this mistake. They think that, okay, being kind to myself or indulging the self in a particular activity or in a particular substance is loving the self. Actually, sometimes loving the self means not indulging the self. And more often than not, to not indulge the self. Sometimes we love ourselves by denying ourselves. So I'd like to explain that because the way that we are normally loved in society is that when someone loves us, then and they want to reward us, they indulge us, yeah. And then if they want to discipline us, then they punish us. Now this dichotomy of indulgence and punishment, that has to end when you have a relationship with yourself. Because self-love is not about indulging yourself or criticizing yourself. And you'll probably find that within your psychology, that is how you are programmed, because that is how we are programmed in society. And it's normally connected to our behavior as well. When we are young children, then our parents, when you do something good, then you're told, you're such a good girl. Yeah, you do something bad, and then you're bad boy. Yeah. So, and our whole self-esteem is built around how we are behaving rather than how we are being. And this is also wrong, because it also means that I'm going to love myself if I'm now going to act in accordance with some ideal that I've set for myself. Perhaps I've set an ideal and then I've made that love for the self conditional on me attaining that ideal or that goal. And that's also not accurate. Why should I only love myself when I have fulfilled an internal condition? In fact, I would probably, that doesn't mean to say that we don't have goals and we don't set ideals for ourselves. We need to do that. Of course we do, because respecting the self, you look at your specialities, you look at your special qualities, you look at your virtues, and you see them as being something that is part of your intrinsic self. And you know those as strengths, as your strengths that are going to help you to propel yourself through life. And then at the same time, you also have to look at your weaknesses. You have to know where you may sabotage yourself, because we all have weaknesses as well. So in fact, the whole process of self-love begins with this self-knowledge, where I come to understand that I have a whole range, a plethora of positive qualities. And in the beginner's course, I tell people to normally try and find 20, and 20 is not such a lot, though of course they all freak out when I tell them they have to find 20 qualities about themselves. But actually 20 is a small amount. At least 35 we should be looking at, and up to 108 qualities that an individual can have. Positive qualities. And then we have our weaknesses as well, our negative qualities. And we need to know those just as well as we know our special qualities. In fact, we know our weaknesses better than our special qualities, because our special qualities or our virtues are so automatic.
We're blinded by them, or blinded to them.
We're blind to them.
Because that's what makes it so natural as well, to fulfill them.
Yeah, you're right. We're blind to them, and also because we're giving them away all the time. Other people are experiencing our virtues, because we have this setup with ourselves where we deny ourselves our own qualities. We will care for other people, but we won't care for ourselves. We will cook that wonderful meal if we have dinner guests, but let it be me on my own at home, and it's 2-minute noodles. Sorry, not me, because I don't eat 2-minute noodles. But do you know what I'm saying? Yeah? So it's, we are trained to exist for others, which is not a bad thing. It's good to share your special qualities. But the metaphysically appropriate thing to do is to first sustain your own self with those qualities and then share them with others as well. So self-love starts with this appreciation. It starts with self-knowledge. I have to know my special qualities. I have to know my weaknesses, because my weaknesses will sabotage me. So it's good to know about them, to see how they work in your psychology. We have to understand ourselves very well. But to begin this process where I take myself as I would a very young and small, vulnerable child who is highly impressionable, and I make it my mission now that I'm going to nurture and develop that potential so that it can find its highest expression. Because apart from the miracle of your existence, there's also a spin-off. The fact that you're alive means that you as a soul have a special purpose in this world drama. There's
symphony.
Hmm?
I wouldn't call it drama, a symphony.
Yeah. Well, you're a musician, so. I mean it in the sense of actors.
Okay.
Yeah, we're actors in this drama, and we all have roles to play. And when we are in alignment with our true self, when the soul is connected to itself, in fact, when the awakened state has occurred, when your pure self-respect is awakened and it's connected to those soul energies that you have within you, then your purpose becomes live. It becomes live. It's like now it starts working. It works in the world. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the next John Lennon or you have to be famous, because each one of us is a world within ourselves, and we can sometimes be a world for other people as well. Just the expression of our qualities does so much for others. They're served by them. But like I said, when you love yourself, you first give yourself that respect, that you use those beautiful qualities also for yourself. So being kind to yourself. So looking after the self mentally means checking that internal narrative. Do you have those? Check them. Start becoming aware of them. Do you have a voice inside that is criticizing you, that is berating you, that if you do something, if you make a mistake, that you reduce your honor internally? In other words, you make yourself feel bad. If you're doing this, you have to stop, because it's a bad habit that we have. It does not improve us. It just reduces our honor. And if it happens, well, let me put it like this. If we were to do that to somebody else continuously and consistently over a long period of time, that would be considered abuse. Mental abuse. Yeah? Or emotional abuse. If there was somebody in your life who criticized you all the time, who brought you down, who was always saying, stop doing that, do this instead, who is always on your case, if that person is doing that all the time, that can escalate into a situation of abuse. It does not improve the person's feeling about themselves, and yet we do that to ourselves. We wouldn't do it to others. Well, we shouldn't. But it's not kind. And so to start this self-talk, this internal narrative, you have to start becoming aware of how it is that I speak to myself. How am I sustaining myself? Because accurate self-respect is based on this knowledge of the self, which I've mentioned before, that I have specialities and I have weaknesses. That means I respect my own positive qualities, and I have humility because I recognize I also have weaknesses. So that keeps me nicely balanced, yeah? Those scales are nicely balanced. And that also keeps ego in check, because having a good balance of self-respect, knowing my specialities, and knowing my weaknesses, that is humility, that means that I will neither have positive or superiority complex, that I'm so fantastic and everybody else is useless. Normally that's the second thought that goes with I'm so fantastic, and that kind of ego, or else I'm so useless and everybody else is okay, which is the inferiority complex. And we know that the ego state either brings about the superiority complex or the inferiority complex. And sometimes we can fluctuate between the two, depending on how we are functioning. So the first thing is a self-talk. So that is the work that you have to do. You have to sit and you have to listen to yourself. So for that you need to give time to yourself and to become much more aware. Because the process of meditation is about hearing, firstly, hearing your own thoughts inside and being able to assess them on the basis of truth. Because the truth is, you're not useless. You, as a living miracle of nature, have a special role to play in the world. And the more you play it, the happier you will feel. And that playing of that part is not so much about doing things, yes, naturally, because we bring our being into everything that we do, but more that we begin to experience that self-worth internally, that who I am, how I am, what I am is valuable. I experience internally my self-value. And until and unless I come to that point where I experience my self-value, I will not be able to love that self, because there has to be that first internal recognition that as an individual I have value and I have to feed it, because your ego will not allow you to lie. There has to be that internal resonance. It's like a resonance inside, that when you say to yourself, I love and appreciate myself, it's because the conscious self is connected with its own inherent self-worth. It's flowing from inside and rising up into the mind. Last week we looked at that, how that's in the unconscious mind and how it opens up. And it opens up when the mind begins to entertain that notion that actually I am a valuable being, that I have worth, I'm worthwhile, and for that reason I can give myself care.
And
I can
be
give
patient.
myself time. Yes?
Yeah, I was going to say, and be patient, but then you said one time.
Yes, it requires an enormous amount of patience. Yeah. In fact, I would probably safely say that if you undertake that kind of process, you're going to be busy with it until the day you die. Because it's a continuous process, just as in the same way, if you live with somebody in your home, you will be taking care of them until they are no longer with you. So in the same way, we have to take care of the self. So the self-talk is very important. So for that, If you need to, you should find some practical affirmations or mantras that you can use. My favorite one, when I used to find the mind creating tricks and causing chaos inside, so I used to stop and I would say to myself very slowly, I love and appreciate myself. Initially, when I first undertook that, I used to write lines. And as I wrote these lines, and this is a practical tip, for this internal narrative to change the critical mind into a loving mind, I used to write it. And when I wrote it, I would not let my mind think any other thoughts while I wrote it, because it was a programming. It's a programming. Just as in the same way, there's been a programming of all of those negative messages. We have to record over them. So when you spot them, if you don't have time to write the lines, or it can be part of your spiritual program, you can do it in the morning, whatever time you want to take to do it. But you have to also catch those thoughts while you're thinking them and then record over them. The old technology of recording was a wonderful metaphor for this. The tape recorder. You would record something, and if you didn't like it, you could record over it again. So the same thing is happening inside.
You allow the words and the sentences to take up space and solidify.
Yes, they have to actually sink deep inside so that they can overpower those other processes. Because and the reason why it has to be so conscious is because it's happening with the conscious mind. The conscious mind is directing, or the intellect is directing the conscious mind to accept those thoughts. It is a training, it's an education of the self. You're re-educating yourself to think in a way that is more appropriate, in a way that is going to serve you, in a way that is actually going to unlock your inherent value. Because nobody is ever improved through criticism, berating, and yet we've been raised like that. The fact that we've actually survived it is a miracle within itself.
I've seen some individuals take that criticism and that beration and almost allow it to fuel whatever they wish to attain. So from that to build and like almost erupt forth and thrive. But that's only in a few cases.
It can work positively if you're rebellious, because then you'll say, there's a rebellion, but then the ego is still involved.
True.
So the true self is actually not deeply engaging, and it's connected to activity. It's not connected to being. So we must understand that there is a difference between doing something and being something, and we're wanting to awaken and emerge inherent value of the self, so that flows inside, so that we're actually feeling that inside, and when we're feeling that inside, we're able to then act out of that internal feeling, which is actually the true self, because the true self is pure, it is powerful, it is useful, it has many qualities and abilities. And we can do anything that we set our minds to do.
It's a perfect foundation.
It's essential, because you'll never be able to do it unless you have awakened the original self inside. So that internal connectivity, and that happens through deep work. It's like if you want to dig a well, you've got to dig deep. If you want a continuous source or a continuous spring of well-being, you have to dig deep, because you also have layers. There are strata in these levels of self-criticism and self-rejection. Actually, we reject the self, we don't love the self. There are too many conditions by which it is that we we feel that we have to meet those conditions in order to say that I'm now okay. And there are some layers are easy to remove and others are very deep. Some can be like hard rock, and then we have to drill. So it requires a lot of attention. The fact that you do it at all is an expression of self-love. That you undertake to alter, to change, to correct that internally is also, it's an expression of love. When you step onto that path where you say, I want to live now from the inside out, because living from the inside out means that you are being true. Being true, you're being real. Because much of life these days is about pretense and putting a brave face on it, or being something that you're not, or
automation.
And we're, yes, because of the habituation, there's people are automatons. Absolutely. Yeah. And people think that they're living their lives, and they wake up when they're 60 and they say, what happened? You know, now I'm supposed to retire and enjoy my life. And yet they have such deep sanskaras, such deep habits of not enjoying their lives, that it's actually simply too late. Because by then, of course, you know, the habits of the body might have caused a lot of damage, and all they're doing is trying to regain their health, or they're experiencing the karma of having neglected themselves for so many years. Yeah, so it's about the mental work. It starts with the self-talk and the mental work. The second thing is to love yourself. You have to be true to yourself. And that's hard, being true to yourself, because it means sometimes that you have to work with the layers of delusion, the lies. We lie to ourselves all the time. Yeah. There are layers of where we settle for something whereas actually we don't want that thing at all. Or we feel that socially that's appropriate. Or we feel that, or you know, or maybe our parents want us to do that, or maybe our children want us to do that. And so we deceive ourselves. I suppose lie is too gross a word. It's more like a form of self-deception. To be true to the self is hard. That's not easy. Being true to yourself means that you have to be honest with yourself. And you have to see on what level am I actually living a lie. And that's tough. But when you begin to start looking at where you might be deceiving yourself, that is where you start to take away the unnecessary and unimportant things. Because the awakened state and the awakened self and the true self is a self that knows. It's spiritually awakened being is connected to itself, and then naturally you will know that what I'm doing, it's the right thing. So we have to check and see. So you have to go home and you have to go and sit with your paper and your pen and look at, where am I actually deluding myself? And that can be frightening, because it might mean that you have to change something. You don't maybe physically have to change it, but just to be willing for a change to happen, it's also a good thing. Because then you are having this conversation with the universe, and you're telling the universe, you're having this self-talk, and you're telling the universe, I'm waiting to shift. I'm ready for a change. And this is part of also our miracle, because when you take time to take care of yourself in this way, then the universe always responds. Because you're throwing out that boomerang of pure intention. Sometimes we are not true to ourselves because we are afraid. We feel we have to do what society tells us to do, or we have to function in a particular way because we're told that that's what we have to do, because we've been programmed into fear. We are perhaps, and most of us are functioning on a basis of fear as opposed to faith. Now, when you are spiritually aligned with yourself and you are you're connected to your own self-worth, and you are sending out that clear message of pure being into the universe will always respond with exactly everything that you need in order to fulfill your purpose. Because it's natural. Because you are part of nature. But we lie to ourselves because we're afraid that we won't get what we need if we don't follow certain conditions. But actually, the converse applies. The minute we are true to ourselves, we get a response of truth back. So there doesn't have to be a compromise. But do we have the faith that it will happen? Because loving the self means you have full faith in who and what you are and your destiny. And your destiny is a great one. It's a good one. I will safely say that every single person in this room, sitting here, and anyone who's listening, you have a great destiny. You do. We were born to be great.
Oh, why would nature want it any other way?
Exactly. Look at nature. We are conditioned to believe in lack. But look at nature. There is a coral tree outside the center. In order to reproduce itself, it only has to really produce one seed. It produces thousands of seed. Nature is abundant, and we are part of the abundance of nature. So there has to be also this loving the self means I have this faith. I have faith in myself. I have faith in this process. I have faith in this great mystery of this amazing life that I have received. Because our lives are here no matter what happens tomorrow, or what happens on the world stage, or what President Trump does next. Never mind all of that. There are so many miracles that are unfolding all the time, and life is an absolute celebration. One of the reasons why we also say this is a drama is because sometimes in a drama, there are bad scenes. But out of those bad scenes, you'll find that always some kind of good ensues. Because we are, in fact, living in a huge fairy tale. It does have a happy ending. It does. That good will triumph over evil. The Hindus are celebrating Diwali at the moment. Yeah, for them it's their Christmas. I want to tell you the story of Diwali so that you can understand this amazing story. Because it's an extremely spiritual, it's an allegory for what happens to humanity. So there was a king and he had a beautiful queen, and they were about to receive their kingdom. And but this prince, in fact, his father died and his mother remarried. And his stepfather didn't like him and wanted to be king, so he banished him from his own kingdom. So he and his wife went to go and live in the forest. And they're very happy, actually. They lived a simple little existence in the forest. They were quite happy, and but they were plotting. How could they get their kingdom back? Anyway, one day, the wife was feeling a bit bored, and her husband had gone out hunting, and before he went out, he said to her, My darling, I'm drawing a line around the house to protect you. And you may not step over that line. No matter what happens, just if you stay within that line, you are going to be okay. So don't step over the line no matter what happens. No problem, Ram, she says, that's fine. She stays in her house. And then various things came to test her. And she stayed within the line. But in actual fact, there was an evil king who was looking to capture her because he had his eye on her. She was very beautiful. This evil king had his eye on her. So he kept on changing his form. And eventually, he changed his form into a beautiful golden deer. And she saw this golden deer and she thought, that cannot possibly be bad. And so she stepped over the line and she ran after the golden deer. And the minute she did that, it turned into this evil devil who said, ha ha ha, now I've got you. And off he carried her to his castle down in the south, and he locked her up and told her, well, he kind of like enslaved her. He enslaved her. So anything that he told her to do, she had to do. So you can guess what happened, right? Husband comes home, no wife, oh dear, gets all his friends together, off they go, and they go and save her and get her out of the castle. And then as they do that, then they go and they walk back up and travel back up to their kingdom. And as they do that, they spread this light. And this is why in India they light lamps. Because as Ram, his name was Ram, and her name was Sita, as Ram and Sita moved back up India, and this is in fact why everybody celebrates Diwali on a different day in India. The Tamils always celebrated one day before. Why? Because as Ram and Sita moved up India, so they brought the light with them, because they were the enlightened ones. So what does the story actually mean? The beautiful bride is the soul. We are that beautiful, cherished, gorgeous being. That is the soul. And that soul has to stay within a certain code of functioning to take care of itself. You know, these are the disciplines, the things, the ways, the nurturing of the self. What I've been telling you about. The soul has to take care of itself and keep itself safe and not step over the line of certain things. Because when we do, then guess what? Negativity grabs us. Ha ha ha, I've got you. Takes us away, and negativity enslaves us. We are enslaved by it, and it tells us what to do, and it pushes us around, and it suppresses us. And so the beauty that we are, of who we are, is not free. Sometimes we experience it, but most times not. And we are trapped. And so we have to be saved. Yes, in the story, Ram saves Sita, that which belongs or considers belonging. But of course, it isn't a prince that must save us, although many of us women have been conditioned to think that too. We have to save ourselves. So that which is the enlightened self, the great self, we have to save ourselves and reclaim our lost sovereignty, our lost kingdom, and place ourselves once again in the correct position where we should be, and that is in our home. Yeah, like Ram had to win his kingdom back, we have to win back our own kingdom of self-sovereignty, where the soul takes care of itself. It looks after itself. It nurtures itself. It develops itself. It cares for itself. Gives value to itself. If we are going to sit around and wait for other people to do this for us, we are going to wait a long time.
And how would they know how to save them?
They don't know how. We only know how to save ourselves. Yeah? Once we start working with this process of self-appreciation, self-respect, self-love, and being true to the self, once we start working with that, we will know how to do it. And I think I also feel that we are guided. We are guided as well. Because there is also someone else who knows us better than we know ourselves. And if it is that I need to experience love from another source in order to feel or to experience my own worth, then yes, then that is when I need to think about a deep relationship with the divine, with that source of divinity that can persuade me, if I need to be persuaded, that I'm worthwhile. This is what our love stories in the world is all about. We're all sitting around waiting for that special someone to come along and to save us and make us feel loved. We've been sold down the river with that story. Because no human being can know the empty space inside of you and how it can be filled. The only way that empty space internally within you can be fulfilled is with the image of your own perfect self. You have to have that vision and faith in your own perfect self and place that in that space, because then it fits, the puzzle fits. The person who is functioning on the basis of self-worth and self-appreciation has taken that form or that puzzle or that missing piece and placed it perfectly within that to complete the self, because that is what completes us. Even actually, it doesn't matter how much God loves us. Until and unless we give ourselves this value, until and unless we feel this self-worth, we won't actually feel divine love. Maybe flashes now and again. This is why people have lost faith in God and have lost faith in the source, have lost faith in the fact that they are loved, because the frequency of self-respect and the frequency of self-appreciation is a matching frequency for the divine frequency, and they need to connect like that in order for there to be that actual experience, not the imagination or just the thought that God loves me. Yes, it's good to start with a thought because everything starts with thoughts, but the actual experience of it, where you feel that, when you're sitting and you feel loved, that nothing and no one can take away from you. When you experience that grace, they call it God's grace. And in fact, for us as yogis, it should not be few and far between. Grace is a daily right that we have, that experience. So once it is that the soul has brought itself into that correct or accurate frequency of conscious self-awareness and self-appreciation, when it's vibrating on that level, it starts to actually pick up and experience divine love. A beautiful metaphor that I like to use for this is the sun is the center of our solar system, and the sun's rays are unlimited. And a ray can reach way across space, and in fact it does. or so we're told. And we experience those rays when we go and we stand out in the sun. Now, somebody who does not go outside will not experience the warmth and the beauty of the sun's rays. So the soul that considers itself worthy to experience love, it's like you step out of the darkness and into that sun, and then you feel those rays of light. And each one of us has a right to a ray that is no one else's. It's unlimited. But if we are not allowing ourselves to feel that love, we won't feel it. Then this is why people don't believe that. They don't believe in God, and they don't believe that God loves them. They don't feel that self-love. But we are loved in the same way as parents love children, unconditionally. So this unconditional, sorry?
I wanted to say, I feel it's present in every moment. We just need to be receptive.
Yes. This is what I'm saying. It's like a tuning in. If you want to pick up a radio station, you have to tune into that radio station. So the tuning of the self, when we tune our consciousness into this enlightened state of self-love and self-appreciation, it's an automatic consequence. You will feel how loved you are. And what could be better than that? How loved I am. But the catch-22 is first you have to love yourself. You have to step out of the darkness and step into the sun. And for that, there are certain disciplines. So this is why the whole thing of the code of conduct is there. So one of the no-nos in self-love is no negative self-talk. The practice has to be that there has to be that dialogue of positivity. There has to be a dialogue of appreciation. There has to be a dialogue of encouragement. So in the same way as you would take a small young child so that you can bring them to the fulfillment of their potential, in the same way the soul has to do, we have to do that for ourselves. We have to undertake that process where from now on I'm going to care for myself in the same way that I'm going to care for a very young, vulnerable child, so that they can grow and take their place in society. Otherwise, we're just eating and sleeping, earning and getting old, and one day we'll die. That would be a waste. Sometimes even I think we when people do this for a long period of time, I've witnessed their self-loathing, because like I said, the first step, or the second step, right? The first step is self-talk, second step is being truthful to the self. When you lie to yourself over an extended period of time and you're not true to the self, that's when you start to hate yourself. People hate themselves because they're not true. Internally, they know, I'm wasting my energy, I'm wasting my specialities, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so because there is that internal state of almost incapacitation, because the negative self-talk has so dominated the consciousness that they've lost all faith in themselves and all love for themselves.
True self hates the illusion of the self.
Isn't that now a conundrum?
Yeah.
Say it again?
The true self hates the illusion of the self.
The true self hates the illusion of the self, and then there's self-hatred. So we have to sometimes perhaps smash it, smash it and say, okay, I'm going to smash this thing now. Doesn't mean that you have to divorce your husband or sell your business. No, it means that you have to start with the right self-awareness, and then the universe will respond to you and will facilitate whatever change you need. Have faith in it. What have you got to lose? You don't have anything to lose. Because for sure, not loving ourselves has probably not got us very much. So we don't have anything to lose, actually, and everything to gain. So good luck. If you need help, you can always find help where you need it. If you need help in your process, you will find that help will come to you without you even having to ask. Because the universe is conspiring for you to discover your greatness. Just like, a little seed that germinates, you know how they push themselves up. Even if someone stands on it, it springs back up again. We're part of that natural process. This is part of nature. To be great is our natural state. Okay, so we're going to end with some meditation now. So if you can sit quietly and just rest your gaze on this point of light up at the top there. So first, just do a check with the body. Relax the feet, the legs, the arms, the hands. Let the back be straight and the chest open. You can look straight ahead or you can look down. Or just rest your gaze gently on that point of light there in the center of the picture. What you are looking at is a spiritual mirror. You are seeing the soul. If you were to see what you, the soul, look like, you would see this beautiful star of light. Your being is made of light, and you, the light, are indestructible. You are forever. Deep within the self lies so much value. You, the soul, are filled with power, truth, love, peace, and bliss. This is the true and original state of the self. It is your spiritual inheritance. It is your spiritual resource. As a soul, all of these pure original qualities translate themselves into so many virtues. You, the soul, have many good qualities that you are naturally radiating and that others are experiencing from you. in this moment, in this meditation, you are giving yourself permission to allow these positive qualities to flow into your conscious self-awareness. Allow your own peace to well up inside of you. Your natural strength and power, feel it like a generator deep inside, pumping out energy. You are strong. Feel this internal self-worth. Just like a system of caves in this introverted state, it's like you can walk through and discover so many treasures deep inside the self. The jewel of love that we give away to everyone else. Today we place this jewel firmly in our heart. Firstly, to let the light of love shine within. We value our own self. We take care of our own self. Internally, we connect with this experience of our own self-worth and allow that to shine out into this room. Let this jewel of pure self-respect radiate deep inside.